everything. And let's see. So you can find that on the YouTube channel, just in the videos area, or on the homepage. You'll see UCF Rosen College Essay and Bootcamp CFA. There's an EFA one here. So it's all there. If you missed it, some of the audio is not great because I did do some walking up and down the aisle and not near the microphone, but you'll be able to hear if you turn up.
Is it one video for the entire day, or is it
two? So I had one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I'll do same today, one in the morning, one afternoon. You're welcome. All right. I'm just thrilled to see so many people still here. I didn't scare everyone off. Inevitably, during these boot camps, there's dropout after the first day, sometimes after the first session, at lunch after students leave. So thank you for coming back. Yesterday we talked about EFA, CFA. We didn't finish CFA. I think we ended on some model fit. Again, to reemphasize the point on model fit is telling you to what extent does the model you're proposing, a model like this, to what extent does this model represent the strongest relationships in your data. And if you're missing a strong relationship, you haven't modeled it, then your model won't fit the data. And so you'll need to change some things. One way you can do that is through modification indices. We'll look at those again in some structural models. We have some FYI stuff here. Oh, a note on degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom is essentially how much leeway do we have in your model? Have you specified every single parameter possible, every arrow possible, or is there some freedom, some stuff to work with? Arrows not yet drawn. Now in a causal model, we haven't drawn any causal models yet, but in a causal model, there's a tendency to draw an arrow from everything to everything, which is completely atheoretical. That just means, yeah, I think everything's related to everything, but also it makes us have 0 degrees of freedom. And when you have 0 degrees of freedom, you can't assess model fit. You might remember, let's see, we had a model up here. This one, no, this one. This one on the left, where everything's related to everything and 0 degrees of freedom. Mostly, actually, there's one missing in there. We have 2 degrees of freedom. This is an atheoretical model. If we have line from here to here, we have it fully specified or fully justified or saturated. There's a bunch of different names for it. We have 0 degrees of freedom, and you couldn't assess model fit. Why? Because you've accounted for every relationship in the data. So does your model fit the data? Well, yeah, perfectly. It has perfect model fit, which actually isn't that great because, again, it's atheoretical. So you're not specifying which relationships should exist. You're just saying all relationships exist. So if you're not able to assess model fit, if you have a CFI of 1, if your C min over DF is 0, check to see how many degrees of freedom you have. Okay. We've talked about fit. We have all this for your information in the slides. The 3 measures I focused on yesterday were the chi-square over the degrees of freedom. In English, it's called the C min over DF. This is an absolute measure of fit. There are a bunch of other measures of fit, but there's a relative measure, that's the CFI. And then you have a parsimony adjusted, meaning the more degrees of freedom you have, the happier your RMSEA will be. The easier it is to get a good RMSEA. We talked about thresholds, they're there as well. They're also on the wiki. They're also in Hare et al. 2010. So this is just review. Causes of poor fit. We talked about this a little bit. Ooh, I didn't talk about this one. And we haven't talked about second order factors yet, so maybe this is jumping ahead. Reasons for poor fit, which is, it happens all too often. And the number one reason is you have an enormous sample size. If you have a sample size of 8,000, it's going to be really, really hard to get good model fit because your chi-square is inflated and almost all fit metrics are based on the chi-square. So that's the difficulty. If you have a really complex model, 40 variables in your model, that's also an inflator of the chi-square. But misspecification, if you have formative factors, we talked about formative versus reflective yesterday. If you have formative factors and you model them reflectively, well, then your model might not fit very well. Also, you shouldn't have formative factors in AMOS anyway, because it doesn't handle formative factors. If you have first order factors, which you haven't really talked about, models of second order factors, that's bad. I'll show you those up next, I think. Over specification. If you have validity and reliability issues, if you have no discriminant validity, that's bad. If you haven't checked for normality in your variables, that'll cause model fit issues. There's lots of stuff that can lead to poor fit. Large sample size, we talked about model complexity, we talked about remedies. We talked about modification indices. Check those in a measurement model like we looked at yesterday, the CFA. You'll be focusing mainly on the covariances between errors within the same factor, and we did that yesterday. For a structural model, you're mostly looking at additional regression lines, and we'll do that again when we do structural models. If you can't obtain good fit, you might consider removing unnecessary paths. Again, this is more in structural models, which we'll do later. But you might have non-significant paths, which you could remove to free up some degrees of freedom. And we'll skip that. Prevention. I think I've emphasized a couple times. If you do your data screening, if you do your EFA, and you get a good EFA, the CFA is just smooth sailing. Model fit should be fine if you get a good EFA. I love this poem. This is the only poem we're going to do in the whole boot camp. You have to add art to boot camps. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the kingdom was lost, and all for the want of a nail. In this case, the nail is non-normal data, or missing data, or outliers, or something way down early you didn't pre-test, you didn't pilot test. That little thing at the very beginning has amazing leverage to ruin your study. So take great care at the beginning. All right, we talked about invariance, and then I want to talk about variance itself. Okay. Variance, there are three types of variance that are measured whenever we collect data. The first one is the one we want, trait variance. Let's say you're collecting data on satisfaction. Let's say that's your dependent variable. You ask questions about satisfaction, and they answer questions about satisfaction, but you're not directly measuring satisfaction. You're using some blunt instrument, like a Likert scale, to assess to what degree they perceive or believe something about satisfaction. And they might believe a 3.27 on satisfaction, but you're only giving them a 3 or a 4. So you're measuring, to some extent, the actual trait, satisfaction. But that's not the only thing you're measuring. That's not the only issue providing variance in responses to that question on your survey. There's also error. So if they're a 3.27 and they're like, no, I'm not really a 3, I'm not really a 4, 4. Well, there's a little bit of error right there because you couldn't give them a 3.27. And so that's the difference from the reality of what they feel and the ability for them to answer. A little bit of error there. That's not all of it, but that's one explanation for error in responses. It's the inability to perfectly, accurately assess a trait. And so using blunt instruments gives us error. You think one solution for this might be to give them a scale of 1 to 100, right? Well, then, am I a 60 or a 70? I don't know. 65. It's hard. We don't know. We don't know what we are in terms of satisfaction or stress or burnout. So we just guess. There's a little bit of error there. And then there's something called method variance. This is the third type of variance when you're collecting data. And this has to do with lots of things. The most common way to think about this is method bias or method variance, where people are certain ways. Americans, good old standard Texan kind of Americans, we tend to answer things very positively. Yeah, I'm satisfied, or yeah, I'm burnt out, or yeah, we're very extreme, right? And so there's a little bit of method bias in that. There's a cultural method bias also. There's research on this on Asian folk, right? and they tend to be more conservative in their responses. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. And so there's a bit of method variance in who you're collecting data from and what you're asking. I just did a study with an awesome lady. She just retired from the Army, and she wanted to collect data on life or death situations and what would make a life or death situation more successful, i.e. less death, more life, right? And for the commanders. And so she surveyed all these commanding officers and tried to find out what would make these situations more successful. When you're in an extreme life or death situation, what gives you clarity? What makes you able to command clearly and not get distracted by all the other stress and pressure coming at you? And the problem with asking these things is they're very sensitive. You're having people recall comrades died, right? I mean, this is bad, hard stuff for people to answer. And so as they answer it, there is a method bias because of the kinds of questions you're asking. And so whether they feel one way or another is always going to be affected by the reflections and the memories. I did another study with a good man who we were studying bribery and corruption in Nigeria. And when you ask somebody if they engage in corrupt activities, there's a tendency to lie, particularly if they are corrupt, right? I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. I'm going to ask you if you're a liar, and you're going to tell me you're not, and I don't know if you're lying about being a liar. So whenever you ask sensitive questions, there's this method bias, and you got to find a way to capture that, people say. And so I'll teach you how to do that. Personally, I think it's all a bunch of baloney. I mean, there's definitely theory to it, but I think it's stupid. But every journal is going to make you do this, so I need to teach you how to do it. And I'll explain why I think it's stupid in a minute. Let's see, common method bias. Cool. All right, there are three main ways to assess method bias, and we're going to jump in and do it. I'm going to talk about it briefly. Yes?
Before I do that, we have the first order concept reflective and second order formative.
We'll get second order in just, it's actually the next slide. So we'll catch it. On method bias, there are three main ways, two approved ways, mostly approved ways, to assess method bias. The old way, which is less approved at this point, less valid, is to do what's called Harmon's single factor test. Let me just show you that real quick. If you guys want to open up the data, was anyone not here yesterday that needs the data? Okay, there was an email sent out by Asli.
I don't see it anywhere.
She'll email it again. Manuel, do you need it? The data? You need it? It's on Dropbox. Asli sent out an email about it. I'm sorry, what? The data is called Bootcamp Original. Let's see. You got it? Sweet. All right. Here we go, Bootcamp Original. And let me go over to Amos. So we're testing this massive model. We were, and then we went to a simpler model. I know you can't see it, but we have a lot of variables. And what we are trying to assess and extract is to what extent is the variance in these items attributed to method rather than trait. So we want to say the variance in trait predicts the variance in trait of something else. So my burnout levels predict my satisfaction levels. But the variance in trait is only one part of the variance, but that's the only part we're interested in. We're not theorizing about the method or the error variance. We're theorizing just about this part of the variance. But there are these other two parts of variance that are sort of causing noise. And we want to extract those. We already extract the error variance in Amos. You can see over here, all these little error terms, these are extracting that error variance. What we're not extracting is the method variance. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. Or at least with this old method, we're going to attempt to see if it's a problem, see how much variance is due to method, supposedly. Okay. So everybody has the data? Okay. What we'll do, we'll go to Analyze, and we're just going to do a factor analysis just like yesterday. Dimension reduction, factor. We're going to do it differently. This is called a Harmon's single factor test. Again, this is sort of an old way to do it, but I still teach it because sometimes you can't get the other two ways to work, and so you have to default back to this. So I still teach it. So dimension reduction, factor, and we're going to stick in there all the variables that we're using in our model. For us, those are the top ones from atypical down to enjoy. Hopefully those are sorted for you. If you grab the data from Dropbox that we finished with yesterday, this will be how it's sorted for you. Just those top 7 or 8. I guess it's 7, top 7 constructs. So atypical use, comprehensive use, usefulness, info acquisition, decision quality, playful, and enjoy. I hear lots of clicking, so I'll wait. And if anyone needs assistance, just raise your hand, I'll be right there. Boot Camp Original. Yeah. I would say, I think, last night at the session. I still hear lots of clicking. You want to see something cool while you're waiting? So I track, this might be TMI, but I track my heart rate due to my condition. I tracked my heart rate, and so every morning I check it out. And so as I sleep, you can see heart rate's fairly normal, 64, and then boom, 37. And then whoa, 35, all the way across. So this is how I sleep at night, in the 30s, most of the night. And then here I am, 100. I showed my neurologist that, and he said, don't look at those. Those are just stress you out. Good. All right, do you have the data? Let's see. Let's see. Okay. So, once you have all the data in there, you remember all the things we looked at yesterday? We're not interested in all those things. Cancel, extraction. The one thing or 2 things we're going to change, actually. Go to a fixed number of factors in the extraction button. You want to fix it to 1. We only want 1 factor. We're going to force it. Just give us 1. Because we want to know what is the common variance among all items if we were to consider them a single factor. Because that should be the percent of method bias, not attributed to error or trait. Again, I think that's baloney, but here it is. In the rotation, you want no rotation. Before we were rotating by Promax, we're going to just do no rotation. And that's it. Hit OK. And you're going to go down to the total variance explained table. And you'll see this far right value, 32.861%. That is supposedly the amount of, or that is definitely the shared variance, the amount of shared variance. Whether that is method variance, it's hard to say. But that is the amount of shared variance among all these items in the model. The threshold here is 50, which is a very liberal threshold. If our items share in common 50% of their variance, then there might be something going on with the method. but we aren't, so we're fine. So we could say at this point we don't have common method bias, and you can carry on. I'll teach you next in just a sec. Be sure also. Okay. Okay.
Okay, you'll do.
So much time.
My bad, I'm not Firefox person.
Ooh,
I know.
you know, nobody's perfect. All right. So again, all this is doing is telling us the shared variance. This is not telling us the method variance. But this is the shared variance among all items in our model of interest. Less than 50% is what we're looking for. Again, for those who had trouble following along, it's just a factor analysis with a forced single factor right here, fixed number of factors, 1. That's the old way to do a single factor test. Yeah, Harmon's single factor test. I'm going to show you the newer ways. The problem is, the reason I hate doing this, the school of thought is still out on method bias. There are arguments constantly on what the proper way to do this is and what's effective. So far, amidst all the turmoil and battles of intellect and methods, the stars of this area of research, Poltzikoff, McKenzie, others like that, Zhao, they have determined that there is no good way to extract method bias, except maybe if you use a marker variable, which I'll show you, and only if that marker variable is theoretically selected to directly extract the method you are expecting to cause bias. So I'll show you that. But they say that's the only good way, and it's not even consistent. So anyway, but reviewers will still force you to do it, and it'll ruin your model. Okay. Over in Amos, with this massive model, this is called the CFA initial. It's in the Dropbox folder in Amos folder. We're going to use this one. I have another plugin that you can't use, unfortunately, unless you have it on your laptop. But I'll show you. So maybe just watch along on this one. Watch instead of following. I'm going to select everything, move it over. You'll see in a minute why you got to have a plugin for this. Okay, deselect everything. I'm going to create a common latent factor. We're essentially doing a single factor test. We're going to create a single factor. Let me highlight it and then use the plugin. Plugin common latent factor. We're going to create a single factor that has every indicator as its indicator. So we'll be able to see how much variance is extracted by a single factor. Give it a sec. A lot of items. It's thinking, I think. I hope. There it is.
One more time.
Sorry, what?
What you just.
Yeah, definitely. So this latent factor is, it has all of the indicators from every factor as its indicators. And by doing so, it's asking to what extent do all the indicators share variance? Because that's all a latent factor is, right? It's what is the shared variance among these items? How do they correlate among each other? Well, if we have all the items together, we're assuming method variance is something common to all the responses that the respondent gave. Well, so then let's put them all together and see how much variance they all share. If they share a lot, well, then there might be some method bias. If they don't share that much, well, then it's not an issue. We didn't ask very sensitive questions. We didn't ask questions that people are prone to answer in a certain way. And so we don't have to worry about the common latent factor of hopefully method bias.
So the second order factor analysis is also used for method bias?
No. So this might look like a second order factor. It's not though, because these are items directly regressed with the. We'll catch second order factors next. Okay. So let's run it. I'll run it. You watch. This plugin, this common latent factor plugin, you don't have that in Amos. It's something one of my students wrote. It's available to you on my wiki. Also, if you just
go Google CLF plugin Amos and go to videos. Oh, it's actually just the first one here. Amos plugin automating common method bias. It's right there. And so I show you step by step how to get the plugin and how to put it on your laptop, whatever it is you work with. But if I run this, it'll say, warning, warning, this isn't going to work. It's true, it won't. I need to double click this and add a variance constraint of 1. There we go. So that was the CLF. It needs a variance constraint. And I run it. Warning. What this says is the CLF's not covaried with all the other exogenous variables. That's fine. That's fine. Proceed. And did it run? Hey, it ran. That's wonderful. Oftentimes it won't run. Why? You're introducing a host of new, you're doubling the number of parameters in your model. So you just doubled complexity. And if you don't have the sample size to handle that complexity, the model won't run. So oftentimes this won't run, which is why we then default back to the Harman single factor test in SPSS. Hit the up arrow and look at the standardized effects. And these are super small, but let me zoom in and you'll see there are some issues. And there are always issues, and it's always an adventure when I do this in a boot camp because I never know what's going to happen. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay, you may see some problems. Notice the indicator loadings here. Some are negative now. That's lame. That's really lame. Some are low. 0.56, there's a negative 32. That's bad. I hate that thing. It messes up your model. Okay, so how do we know if we have method bias? There are a couple ways. First off, go to your output and look at the estimates. Look at the regression weights. Open this up here and go down to the CLF. Well, you want to look at all of it, but look at the regression weights for your regular model. Are they still significant? If they're not significant, there might be a problem. Looks like all of ours are still significant in this view. Let me scroll down. There's one here that is not significant. Info acquisition to its 5th indicator. Not significant. That p-value is greater than 0.05, but it's only 1. Look at the CLF indicator regression weights. Are they all significant? Yes, that's a problem. Let's keep scrolling. Yes, all of them are less than 0.05. Now, what does that mean? That means we have a lot of data. We have 381 sample size. So yeah, they're going to be significant almost no matter what. So that's maybe not the best approach. You get a smaller data set, that might be a more accurate assessment of whether you had method bias, is if these CLF indicator regression weights were not significant. If they're not significant, then you don't have a problem. Another way is to fix the model and then determine if there's a great difference between your original path loadings here and then the ones after you add the CLF. So right now, obviously, there's a terrible difference because it's broken our model. So how can we fix it? I love it when things break in class. This is great. So how do we fix it? What I would do is I would move around a few things. I'd fiddle with it. There's a lot broken here. I don't know if fiddling's going to do us any good, honestly. I don't think it will. If you had one issue, let's say it was just this factor that was having problems, we saw some negative regression weights here, I would move around this constraint. Let me show you. I would move this variance constraint back onto one of the regression weights. And I'd sort of iteratively just try this one, this one, this one. Is that fiddling? No, it's just trying to adjust things a little bit. Is it changing your model?
not from a theoretical standpoint. No, it's not changing your model. You're just trying to find, is there a way to make this fit better with CLF messing everything up? What you do is you move that regression constraint down the row. I'm going to show you. It will change things and might make your model work a little bit better. So here we have a variance constraint of 1. I'm going to remove that and just stick it right here on this enjoy 1 and see if that fixes those negative error variances. Why does it? Mathematical. It just adjusts the way things are ordered as they run through the algorithm. And so I'm going to hit the up arrow. Sometimes it works better. Up arrow. It worked. Hey, look. They're all positive again. What do you know? I wasn't expecting that, actually. That's great. Wow. We should try that on usefulness. Let's see if that works. Sometimes it works. We just got lucky this time. Sometimes it doesn't work. In which case, I'll tell you what to do next. Here we go. Regression weight 1. I love it when it works. This one probably won't, because I can't get lucky twice in a row. It actually ran. That's a good sign. Huh! It worked! Those are all positive now. Wow. I should go to Vegas. That's great. I'm lucky twice in a row. Let me try this again. How about down here? This one. Get rid of that variance constraint. This would be a miracle if this one worked. It's like rolling 7 3 times in a row with a 6-sided die. See, now that one didn't even run. That one broke. This is the most common. So how do I know it didn't run? You see up there, the up arrow is deactivated. Means it didn't converge, it didn't minimize. It might say somewhere that the iteration limit was reached. This is the most common result. And let me show you what happens. So the up arrow isn't active, you can't hit up, but the output is still available. So we go click on the output and see what the problem is. It says iteration limit reached. You can click on that to see what it means. It means no minimum was found. It couldn't find a good solution. Well, there's one way we can fix that. We can increase the iteration limit. Over here in the analysis properties, in numerical, it says I'll iterate 50 times. If I can't find a good solution in 50 iterations, I'll quit. Well, let's just bump that up to 500 and see if it'll run this time. It's going to take longer because it's 500 iterations, or up to 500 iterations. So it's going to think things going to take a lot more time here. Usually, this doesn't fix anything. It's thinking, and nope, it didn't work. The up arrow is still inactive. I can look at the output. Iteration limit not reached. Here we go. Minimization was unsuccessful, therefore the results are invalid. Let's find out why. If we go look at the estimates, so it did actually get some estimates. That's good when we increased our iteration limit. And that will allow us to detect where the problems are. How will we know where the problems are? One of these things is not like the others. One of these things just isn't the same. So decision quality has problems. You can see the error on decision quality.
From decision quality 10.
Yes. Here's the big fatty right here, right? Decision quality 10. Massive error. Well, what happens? And I'll put the regression constraint right there. Because right now it's on decision quality 6. I love it when this happens. When it breaks. So let's move it from decision quality 6 to 10. Again, why are we moving it to 10? Because it was the one with the greatest error in this the S.E column, the standard error column.
Why is it on decision quality 6 to begin with?
Because it was arbitrary, it was the top one. It used to be on the variance of the latent factor. I moved it to the top one, and that didn't work. So we looked at the output, and hey, it ran. Ooh. Did it work well, though? Oh my goodness! Look at that. It worked.
These are all positive and strong. Well, this is fabulous. I've never had something work this well in a boot camp,
As evidenced by yesterday's fiasco. Usually it's more awkward. Whoa! Everything worked. So the only one that has a problem right now
is enjoyment. All the rest have great loadings. They're all fabulous. This one, though, we have 0.16, 0.10, 0.25. These are really problematic. Now I'm going to ask you why. Why might enjoyment have low loadings? Let me explain what this is doing. This guy says, what do all the items have in common? And then it's extracting that commonality out of all the items. And the remaining commonality within a factor is in the loadings here. Why might we have trouble with enjoyment? Any thoughts? Why would enjoyment have more variance sucked out of it? Any thoughts? Sorry? Sure, I'll show you. Did you open it? Yeah. So, I don't know if anybody here studies psychology or behavioral psychology, or I guess in tourism, you're all over this, but the mood of the individual greatly impacts all their decision making, all their behavior. And so, if I'm someone who says, I enjoy using Excel in this context, there are some weirdos out there like that love Excel. If they say, I enjoy Excel, well then I'll find it useful. I'll be playful with it. I'll be whatever the other constructs are, right?
It's a common denominator. I'll make good decisions with it.
Yeah, I use it different than everybody. I love it. I get great information out of it. I use all of it. I love it. That's how some people would answer this. And others who say, oh no, I don't like it. I don't like using Excel. No, it doesn't give me good information. No, I don't use much of it because I don't like it. Right? And on the opposite end, no, I'm not playful with it. That's just weird. Right? And so enjoyment is this common underlying mover of how we respond to all the other items in the survey. So is efficacy, by the way. Anyone who works with self-efficacy is a very problematic construct in terms of method bias. Because if somebody says, yeah, I'm good at that, yeah, I get good information out of that, yeah, they're positive about everything. Or if they say, no, I'm not good at that, they'll have high anxiety, low performance on everything. So efficacy and enjoyment are two very common underlying factors that push responses for all items in a certain direction. Yeah.
Do you think that if these kinds of constructs are in your research and people know that the reviewers are going to
Most reviewers won't know. We don't think that these people do. But you know now. And so if you see that enjoyment is related to everything, it works great in my model. It predicts this and it predicts that and it predicts this. There might be a reason, because that's influenced how they answer everything else. So I would recommend extreme caution in using enjoyment or self-efficacy in your models. You certainly can. There are great theories built around them. Just use them with caution and interpret them with caution when you're reading other people's papers. So, do you have a question?
So if you want to do marker variables to avoid this,
Okay, we haven't talked about marker variable. Let's do that.
I was going to say, not to affect their mood up front, you would place those questions at the very bottom.
Okay. That is a good idea. So, that's a really good idea. Bouncing again. So, for those of you here, if you're worried that self-efficacy or enjoyment might influence the way they answer other questions, if they've already answered those types of questions, stick them at the bottom. That's one way to avoid it. Now, they might just be innately happy about Excel, or have great self-efficacy regarding Excel, and in which case it will still influence them. But I think that's a great idea. Stick them at the bottom, so it has less influence.
Order points, so you order them effectively so that they don't.
Yeah, it's called item order bias. Yeah, Very good. That's a great idea. I had never thought of that, actually. That's great.
So in this case, what do I do in my paper?
We've just determined that nothing is affected by method bias except enjoyment. But we have a theoretical reason for why enjoyment is behaving like this. What do we do? Are we justified in saying we don't have method bias, we have enjoyment bias? Because that's really what we're seeing. We have enjoyment bias. Can we remove the CLF and proceed? Or is our enjoyment bias truly our method bias? In which case we need to retain it. That's a tricky question. And what I would do is play the game of scholarship, and I would remove the CLF at this point, theorize what the issue is, and provide evidence, and then wait for the reviewers to say, well, no, you need to stick that back in. Get that CLF back in your model, because you're not capturing the enjoyment bias. So I'd wait for the reviewers to call on that, but what is the best approach? Problem, here's why there's a debate. Enjoyment is failing now, right? If we think about convergent discriminant validity and reliability, enjoyment's failing. It has low loadings. It's never going to meet an ADE of 0.5, not a chance. If we retain it, we are not truly measuring enjoyment, right? We're measuring some broken enjoyment, which isn't enjoyment at all. So then, if we leave it in and we regress it upon other constructs in our structural model, we are essentially controlling for its effect. So I would argue to remove it.
Now there's one other approach we can take that Jolly brought up. It's called the marker variable approach. I hope common method bias and variance is making some sense, because it's a confusing topic that even the top scholars are still fighting about. Okay. The other approach, which is considered the most rigorous and the only true way to extract method bias, is to use what's called a marker variable. And a marker variable is a theoretically extracted variable. If I'm asking about something sensitive, like bribery or corruption, there is a socially desirable way to answer those questions. Oh yeah, I'm not corrupt. I'm very ethical. I never lie, never cheat, never steal, right? Well, if you then ask people about their socially desirable behaviors, let me provide you actually just a concrete example here. I collected social desirability bias here. Where'd it go? Down here at the bottom. Social desirability. And you might think this is silly, but this is how it's done. Have you ever taken a survey to ask these questions? I am always willing to admit it when I make a mistake. Of course I am. I always try to practice what I preach. Of course. I never resent being asked to return a favor. I have never been irked when people express ideas very different from my own. I have never deliberately said something that hurt someone's feelings. I like to gossip at times. That's a reverse coded question, obviously. There have been occasions when I took advantage of someone, also reverse coded. I sometimes try to get even rather than forgive and forget, reverse coded. At times I have really insisted on having things my own way. And there have been occasions when I felt like smashing things. There is a socially desirable way to answer every single one of those questions, obviously, right? So, but all of us, let me just generalize here, all of us are somewhat at fault in all of these, right? Sometimes we are hurt. Sometimes we insist on having things our own way, right? We're all a little bit at fault with all of these. So
what we can do, if we ask these questions in a survey, we can see to what extent someone is answering our survey in a socially desirable way. And then we share the shared variance with these, with all the other items, right? We can see how much shared variance there is between these and all the other items, and the amount of shared variance here is then extracted as the social desirability variance, and that can be pulled out, and then we can say we have extracted method bias.
So I'm just going to use the top 5 here. Then let's see, 6, no, top 5 because they're the non-reverse coded ones. And I'm going to stick them in as a new latent factor. Here we go. This is a massive model. Let me zoom out just a little bit more, and I'm just going to create this. Let's see, itty bitty. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. And I need to covary it with everything else. This one, this one, this one, this one. And this one. There we go. Plugins, draw covariances, please work. Oh, this wasn't selected? How did that happen? Select, select, select. I'm going to close this model and reopen it. Sometimes Amos is finicky, especially when you have a massive model. So I'm just going to close it and then reopen it. There we go. Okay. Come on. There we go. Just too big. Now the beauty of using a marker variable is it will give you the exact percentage of shared variance, which we don't get without the marker variable. Come on. There we go. Plugins, draw covariances. There it goes. Okay. And deselect all. Let's name this as social desirability and give it those 5 items. There they are. This one, please work. This one. Oops, that didn't work. We should probably just do this with a smaller model. Yikes. That's what we're going to do. Sorry, that's going to take forever. Let's just go over here. It's not going to behave. Nope, don't save. We'll create a common latent factor. So in the marker variable approach, you do need a common latent factor. Throw that in. Plugins, common latent factor. There it is. And then we'll draw the marker variable. Change this to 1, 1. There we go. And then we'll do this. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you've done all this stuff before, so I'm not going to go slow. I'll just run through it here. Okay. Get the items. There they are. And plugins, name unobserved variables for the error terms, covary, all of these. This will be way faster. Here we go. Okay. And then draw regression lines from the CLF to these items, because we want to extract all the shared variance among all the items, including social desirability. There we go. Make it look pretty. There we go. Okay, the last thing you need to do
is you need to constrain all of these lines to be equal.
I should have written a plugin for that. I haven't done that yet. But all you have to do, let me zoom in. Whoa, too close, a little too close. There we go. double click the arrow, name all of them A. If you name them the same thing, they will be forced to be equal in Amos in unstandardized loadings. Now, the only time you would do this with a marker variable is if you had a theoretically selected marker variable. In our case, social desirability bias. And you only have that when you're asking sensitive questions that should be affected by social desirability.
So you have to think about this
Before you collect data. Yep. Yes. So you are collecting data on bribery, corruption, anything sensitive that people will be have a tendency to answer in a social desirable way. You need to collect this. If you're asking questions that are not going to be affected by social desirability bias, there is currently no theoretically no evidence to validate any other theoretically sampled marker variable, such as social desirability bias. There's no other variable like that that has been validated. If you come up with one and validate it, please invite me as a co-author, and we will get that puppy published.
Then if your subject of study is not sensitive at all, do you still need the common sense bias?
According to the Gospel of St. James, or the common practitioner or scholar, according to me, no. No, you should be aware of the effects of things like enjoyment and efficacy, but there is, according to also Podzakoff and McKenzie, who are the authorities on method bias, you can't extract method bias without fouling up your model. Yeah. So if a reviewer says you got to do it, point to their article and say, no, I can't. It'll break my model, and I can't do it accurately, so why do it at all? Okay. Podzakoff and McKenzie. It might even be in the references area here. Let's see. References. Let's see. McKenzie. There it is, 2012. Common method bias. There's also the Podzakoff one right there. And they say essentially that the CLF is a poor alternative, and it doesn't always work. The marker variable with social desirability is the only established method for doing it accurately, consistently. There is no other marker variable that has been proven to work.
So no matter what is the construct that has these two, you use always social desirability?
No. So no matter what what else you're collecting on, do you use social desirability? No, it's only if you're collecting data on sensitive items, things that people would answer in a socially desirable way.
So for you, enjoy this is true, the social desirability.
For which?
Even the construct that you have.
For enjoy? No, not in this case.
For your study about corruption, what you use as marker value?
Social desirability bias.
And what's good for ethics? With most of the key models have problem with attitude and.
I'm sure they do. So if you want to collect enjoyment and efficacy when you're doing attitude scales, those are general items regarding one's positive affinity, right, towards whatever. And so those could be a theoretically sampled marker variable, but they've never been established in the literature as successful marker variables.
If you don't have this marker variable, you can't say what percentage of the variance is for the method.
You can do a single Harman single factor test and see what is the percent shared variance. Definitely.
You get different results.
Yeah, so the Harman single factor test only shows you the shared variance, but they might share variance among the traits. You're not getting the method variance.
No, I mean in the single method and CLF you get different results.
You do. Yes, you do get different results in the CLF.
In the single factor, it's 39% of the shared variance.
Mm-hmm.
It seems good.
Yes.
In this way, the attitude construct and a bunch of other usefulness and these constructs, all of them are going to work. You know that don't they work.
Right.
What should I do that? I mean.
So what should you do, especially if you don't collect this?
No, I don't have it.
So if you don't collect this, what should you do? You should cite, there are multiple articles that say conducting a CLF approach
like without the marker variable, just using this or using a Harman single factor test are no good. And it does more damage than good. And so I would argue and cite those articles that I should not include a CLF because it will damage my model and it does more harm than good. So that would be my approach. But some reviewers will still say, no, sorry, you gotta do method best.
Question, constraint all those tests today. If you look at the standardized regression, can't you say this one is the method variance?
You can see which one has the highest loading, and you'll say, that's the item that has the most in common with everything else. Yeah. Okay.
Let me run this. It won't run because there's missing data in the social desirability bias questions. I wonder why. Some people don't like answering those questions about revenge and lying and gossip. Who knew? All right. Let's proceed. Oh, I have modification indices selected. Apologies. Here we go. Output, uncheck modification indices. You can't run estimate, means, and intercepts and modification indices at the same time. And here's what we'll get. If I look at the unstandardized loadings,
You'll see they're all identical. They're all 24. If you square that, you get the shared variance percent. So 24 squared is, what, 6%? Something like 5%. That's not very much. We're great. We don't have a method bias issue. Yay. What is the threshold here? There is no published threshold on the percent. The only published threshold is regarding the Harman single factor test of 50%. So what is good here? I would say after squaring, if you have less than 30%, you're good. Again, that's not published, so I don't know how you'll cite that. You can just say there is no published threshold, but we argue that 30% or less is good. Of course, if you get 31, we might argue 35% or less is good. Okay, there's that. Questions on method bias. That's the extent of the method bias on a FICO route. Yes.
Let's say you have method bias. You imputed the something with the CMB.
Thank you. Good
So
point.
that model works, but can't you use, keep the CMB and use the CM model?
Yes.
Instead of that model?
Yes. Okay. So for those who didn't follow that, let's say this is 65 or 70. I guess really high, right? And we square it, we get 40%. Well, we have method bias. So what do? We retain the CLF. We retain, wherever it went, the marker variable, social desirability bias, as we then move into a structural model. So as we begin to draw arrows from our latent constructs to each other to test causal relationships, we would leave this in, keep it here, in order to continue to account for the common variance, the method variance. And we'll do that as we move from CFA to a causal model. I'll make sure to do that. Any other questions regarding method bias? Again, this is a complicated, messed up topic.
So you didn't tell why it's stupid.
Oh, why is it stupid? Yeah, that didn't come out. Here's why it's stupid. It is extracting the shared variance, unless you've got social desirability bias, which is a very small percent of studies that are done. Unless you have that, it's really stupid because the CLF is extracting all shared variance. Well, you're theorizing that these constructs are related, right? That means they share variance. And if you then extract that shared variance, what's left to relate them to each other? You've gotten rid of their relatedness with your common latent factor. And so then if you retain it, because a reviewer tells you data, what's left is the unshared variance. And so as you try to causally link one to the other, you will have a desperate time of showing a significant or meaningful effect. But what have you done? Have you extracted method bias? No, you've extracted shared variance. It's stupid. Now, the reason it's not stupid when you're using a marker variable is You're now saying, here are these 3 variables that I think are related in my causal model, right? Here's this 4th variable down here, this 4th construct that has nothing to do with these other variables. If the items here share variance with this guy, that's unexplained. That's not due to some trait, right? That's unexplained method variance. You can extract that, that's fine. We don't want that. We want to know the raw trait correlations. And so this, the CLF is only going to extract what is shared in common from these items and these items, right? But since we don't anticipate these items sharing a lot of variance with these other items, it only extracts that method variance. So that's cool. But the rest is cool. Yeah.
So if you don't have that counter variable, because you didn't know
Yeah,
this,
and most people don't.
study you conducted this CLF, and you realize you have some issues with common multiplier.
Or at least you think you do, but you don't know because you don't have a marker variable.
Can't you, I mean, impute those constructs and check if the relationship works or not?
You can certainly move forward and try it. Yeah. What I'm saying is by including the CLF, not including the social desirability bias marker variable, by including this alone, you're extracting some of the meaningful relationships between constructs. It's being sucked out by this. You may still find some significant effects, but they are warped by the presence of the CLF.
So it's not theoretically wrong to do that?
According to me or according to the literature? According to me, I think it's theoretically a mistake to include this when you don't have a theoretically driven marker variable.
Mechanism says that's the only way when you don't have one.
So he says it's the only other way when you don't have a marker variable, and then he says, but it's still not good. He says, I mean, if you have to, go ahead, but it's still not it's not an accurate way to extract the method variance. So he's the expert in getting it. It's not a good way. Anything else on method bias?
So if any editor asks us to do this, we say, it's stupid, James says so.
It's stupid, James said so. Yeah, Gaskin et al. 2015. Right?
You know, people are more susceptible to this if you're building new, theory, or you're adding something that someone else did, or you're doing something that should be in more account.
Would the reviewers require it more? Is that what you're asking? Not necessarily. It's required particularly when you're asking sensitive stuff. If you're not asking sensitive stuff and reviewers insisting you do this, they're idiots. So tell them so very politely and give good theoretical reasons why this makes absolutely no sense and it's just breaking your model. So why are you doing it? And hopefully that'll work. Some people are dogmatic though. Really dogmatic about this without cause. Okay. Any other questions about method bias? I'm so glad we made it to method bias and that it worked. That was a miracle. It's 10:04. We had a break 10:20, right? All right. Let's see what's next. I think we have time for some small things here. So we covered types of variance. I hope this makes sense. What types of variance there are and what types we're hoping to get. Method variance, we talked about it. One other way to prevent method bias. Oh, not so much. The way Ozzy said was put some of the influential items at the bottom. That's good. Another way is by telling people your survey is completely anonymous. There is absolutely no way we can trace your answers back to you. So you can, I know people will still think, no, my boss is giving you the survey, and I better play it safe. So that's just one way. Asking the DVs, the dependent variables, separate from the IVs. So if you collect data on all the independent variables in one survey, and then a week later you ask about the dependent variables, supposedly this breaks the need for assessing method bias, because however they answered the independent variables, whatever affected their answers there is going to be different from whatever affected their answers to the dependent variables if you collect them at a different time. Another way is to use an objective dependent variable. So don't ask them about the dependent variable, go collect it. If you're doing firm performance, don't ask the CEO about firm performance. Go check their share price. Go check their revenue. Go check their employee size, things like that, their growth. And if you do that, if your dependent variable is not solicited from the respondent, you don't have to do method bias checks. So that's when we do it.
Could also online data collection help? Not face to face.
Okay, yes. So here's a sort of there's a lot of things wrong with collecting data from people you don't know, but this is one good thing by collecting data from people you don't know, like mechanical Turk, right, or culture surveys analysts. They have no connection with you whatsoever. They can answer perfectly honestly. They know no one will ever take it back to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, you can have sensitive stuff on mechanical Turk, and it should be fine. Okay.
Oh, second order factors. Okay. Okay. We have time. We have time. What's next? That's next. Let's definitely talk about second order factors. This is good stuff. Okay. Let me go back to, let me save this as the method bias. Let's see. CFA, marker, variable, CMB. Okay. And let me go back to CFA problematic. There it is. Okay. Excuse me. Whoa. Let me add some stuff here.
We're going to talk about second order factors. So sometimes you have a construct that has sub-dimensions. Some of you maybe have looked at the construct burnout before. Burnout is a very, very common construct in organizational literature. I mean, it's comprised of three things, and we know these from abundant evidence. Something like depersonalization, something and something that I can't remember. Three different things, and each of those have their own items. And so there's a higher order construct, which is burnout, and then it has lower order constructs of these three different things, and each of those has its own items. I should show you a picture.
It even has, let's see, I think I have it here in the bootcamp slides. Here it is, second order informative factors. Cool. We talked about formative reflective. Here we go. There.
Here's burnout. It's comprised of emotional exhaustion, reduced personal accomplishment, and depersonalization. These three things. But each of these three things is a latent factor comprised of a couple items. So this is a second order factor. In this case, it happens to be formative. And these are first order reflective constructs. I often get emails about EFAs that are a disaster, or CFAs that are a disaster. And I'll notice that an individual has 20 items for a single construct. If your construct has 20 items, most likely it has subdimensions inside of it. Like this, it has multiple subdimensions, and in that case, you need to model it differently, treat it differently. Also, you might find, let me get out of this, you might find that you have two factors that absolutely will not achieve discriminant validity. For example, we might have design and skill acquisition. Pretend for a moment that these have a correlation of 0.8 or 0.9, and there's no way we're going to achieve discriminant validity here. Well, you got to ask yourself, why is that correlation so high? Maybe they're parts of the same thing. I had this with, what was it? I can't remember. I had some construct. Like enjoyment and satisfaction, and system satisfaction and usefulness. These two, if it's useful, they're satisfied, and being satisfied is part of the perception of it being useful, and it's the result of it being useful. And so we said, well, system satisfaction and usefulness are really asking the same thing. If you found it to be useful, you were satisfied with it. And so we made a second order construct that represented utility, I think is what we called it. Yes.
Having this criminal issue can be signed up having second order.
Yes. Yes. Let's throw some in here that might have issue. I'm not sure if I have great ones for this, but let's throw in here. We have, this did happen with this data set. Do you know what? Here it is, down at the bottom, up at the top. Info acquisition. Okay, here. When I designed this data set, I did not include info acquisition and decision quality. I called all of these system success. And it was, I had, what is that, 12 items for system success. You'll notice these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, new construct, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I designed this without knowing that this was a second order factor. And in my EFA, truly exploratory, they would not load together. And so I thought, maybe there are two different dimensions going on here. So I looked at the items, and sure enough, if you look at the wording of these items, they are two different things trying to get at the same thing. Excel helps me understand information. Excel helps me learn. Excel helps me interpret data accurately. Excel helps me become more aware of information. Excel helps me recall information. Excel helps me identify problems. That's slightly different. I have a little break, but it's the same idea. Excel makes me more effective in my decisions. Makes me helps me make higher quality decisions. Helps me in my decision analysis process. Anyway, all these are about decision making. These are about information acquisition. I didn't realize that when I wrote the survey because I was just using somebody else's items. Anyway, so what we might do, let me throw these in here and you'll see. Let's take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. Let's just make like this, and then we'll turn this one to decision quality. You'll see that they have a strong correlation. Hopefully this won't fail. Info acquisition. Run it. Up arrow. There it is. Look at that. Oh, that's unstandardized. Here's standardized. Look at that. 0.71 correlation. Why? Because originally they were the same thing. I didn't think they were two different things. I thought they were the same thing. So at this point, now luckily we have high loadings here, and I can say these are two separate factors. I don't have to model them as a second order factor. But let's say we have higher loading here, and we couldn't achieve discriminant validity between this one and the one above it. We might need to model these second order as a second order factor, which I'll show you how to do. What you do is you delete the covariances between them, all of them, like that. And then you're going to create a new factor. There we go. And it is going to be resolve conflict. Oh, yes. Okay, what this is telling me is you can't draw an arrow. You can't have an endogenous variable, which is what this is going to become. I'm going to point arrow at it. You can't have an endogenous variable that has a constrained variance. Because if you're predicting it, you can't constrain its variance because you're trying to predict its variance. So we can't do that. So let me get rid of that variance constraint. The error said that pretty well. So luckily, the error messages in Amos are fantastic, even though the rest of it is just awful. So here we go. Draw that, and give a variance constraint here, because this is now just a regular old factor with two regular old indicators, right? Info acquisition, decision quality now become the indicators of this higher order thing, which I called system satisfaction, or system success is what we called it. And now we need to covary all the highest order factors, which in this case is this second order factor
and this first order factor. And then we have to make it look pretty. There we go. Let me save this as, one moment. Oh, thank you, yes. This is going to be CFA, second order. As Jolly pointed out, we missed one thing. These are now endogenous. They're being predicted, therefore, they need to have error. There we go. Save, run, up arrow.
Okay. Check this out. This is really cool. We have two indicators for system success. They have the same requirements as down here. So here we have great loadings, fabulous. Here we have great loadings, 0.8 and 0.89. We will now assess the convergent discriminant validity and reliability of the higher order factor, not of the lower order factors. We no longer care about these are more like indicators now. We're caring about this one and this one, all covariate highest order factors. So, do we have good conversion validity? The answer is yes. 0.8 and 0.89, they're going to average out about 0.7. Fabulous ADE, fabulous CR, depending on the error. I doubt there's much error. We have discriminant validity between system success and skill acquisition. Definitely. This is a 0.44, which is far less, especially if you square that, far less than when you square these guys. So we have all of it. That's great. We want to look, though, at model fit. If we go to model fit, do we have good model fit? Because one argument you need to make, if you're going to make a second order factor, you need to demonstrate that the model still has good fit. Because often second order factors will break model fit. But in this case, we're going to have better fit. Look at that, 1.790, that's going to be between 1 and 3, 1 and 5. CFI, greater than 0.95. This is great. So we are justified in making this a second order factor. RMSEA, fabulous, less than 0.05, and P close, greater than 0.05. Yes? You can have very close, it can be very close. You'll have a different number of degrees of freedom is the problem. And when the degrees of freedom exceeds the denominator, and so when it changes, all the other measures should change, but you could be very close. One way to determine if it's exact is to do this little trick in the output. Up here in the top left, notice this 3, that's the number of decimals we observe. You can bust it out to 10 if you want, and you can see how exactly similar we really are. And you might be similar to 3 decimal places, but not to 10.
And if that second order was formative, James cannot handle this?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so burnout, we just saw burnout, which is a formative second order factor. Let me send this back to, 17, wrong way. Who needs 17? Even in physics, they only need 5. Okay. In, here it is. Could we model this in Amos? We have first order reflective. We can definitely model those. We have second order formative. Could we model that in Amos? The answer is yeah, you could. But Amos is a covariance-based structural equation modeling software package. Formative factors are not built upon the assumption of covariances. There's no necessity for these to be covariant. They can, there's no necessity for them to be covariant. And so Amos does not handle formative factors very well. You can model them that way. You can probably Google it. There are probably tutorials on how to do it, but you're breaking the assumptions of covariance-based SEM by doing it. So if you have a formative second order factor or even a formative first order factor, you should be modeling that in something like PLS, not in Amos. Okay. Any questions about second order factors before we take a break? Fabulous. All right, we'll get back together in 20 minutes. And I think that does us for CFA, pretty much. Was your hair blonde yesterday?
No, maybe a white scarf or something. I just remember white around the head. Maybe that's it. Okay, sorry.
Questions. I wrote as I went.
Sure.
That's related. What's your topical expertise? What's your field?
Information systems, human-computer interaction, and also behavioral stuff, psychology and cognitive.
Organizational psychology, justice.
Did you have a quick question?
Quick question.
You look very familiar.
I was here yesterday.
Maybe that's it. All right, I don't know you from before.
No, just my question,
Okay.
and I'll come back with just some thought. Wanted to discuss the idea of self-efficacy with pre-professionals.
Okay.
Trying to do that in education, not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Wondering if that's been done in other fields.
Okay, I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have a quick question?
Yeah.
If you had a long question.
Okay. I don't know if it has to do with the same thing.
Maybe.
I was curious about your, the one you were talking about, the marker variable, the self.
Oh, social desirability bias? Yeah.
So, I study emotional intelligence.
Oh,
She studies
okay.
emotions as well.
Richard Boyd, that's easy. You know, good friends. Yeah.
So, for something like that, I'm not using this for my dissertation, but for other studies when I'm having people self-evaluate themselves
Mhm.
on those types of variables, would you suggest including
Yes.
that in there? Okay, that's what I was thinking.
And in the references folder, I think I have the better scale. Let's see, references. Let's see, is there a 5-item scale somewhere? No, maybe I don't have it. Let me go get it. I'll stick the 5-item scale in here for social desirability bias.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have to go, remember.
Here it is, right here. Yes. Okay.
I won't be back after our break, but
Okay. There's
I'll be here
Hayes.
tomorrow. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's answered one question.
Good.
Well, she's an emotional individual, same class. That's what I was saying.
I was like,
I was like, I'm in justice. Would that be considered? Because I'm not looking at the justice class. I'm looking at injustice, which is an organizational setting, which brings us back to that stuff is my boss asking that survey. What are the chances that he or she will not find out?
And there's always the worry in the back of the head of the employee that my boss is going to find out what I wrote. Even if it says it's completely anonymous.
I'm not linking it to anything melodramatic. I'm linking it to emotional. Would you recommend to put that 5 scale?
If there is any chance they will be answering those questions non-truthfully because it's socially desirable to not answer truthfully in this case, yes.
Well, I'm not. The justice scale are positive questions. I am not writing anything, negative. But the title for the question is Think of Customer Complaint. And customer complaint, it's a holy grail in hospitality, you have to make them happy. My theory is that you have to make them happy, but they are not happy at the time of the interruption, and you still make mistakes. And in a sense, that particular thing. So I would say that. Okay. So that's one. Great.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I haven't submitted my survey yet. So.
Yay! And to be safe, just always collect the 5 items. Just collect it. Stick them at the very end because they're sensitive.
They're sensitive. They're sensitive. So you actually answered my another question. They are apparently standard, right? Regardless, as long as it's sensitive topic, that social desirability is standard for whatever it is. Question number 3. Hold on, I wrote as I went. Am I keeping you from your break? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm here to serve.
Well,
As long as there's some food left, I'll be okay.
Yes. You keep on saying this, and I have a question, more method question. You're saying I have this data and it's been piloted and you piloted it.
Pretest.
Pretest. So tell me, what do you assume under piloting? So you are taking the sample of the population, 20, 30, 50, whatever, of what you're planning to survey for your pilot and see how it works and adjust?
Typically, that's what you do, yes.
That's the
It
definition.
depends. If you're surveying people who are hard to get, CEOs, surgeons, doctors, any sort, high-profile people, then you wouldn't pilot test with those guys. You're cannibalizing your sample.
Okay.
But if you're surveying students, endless population.
Endless population.
So yeah, get 100 of them for your pilot test.
What is your opinion then? Would you like to go to the bike?
Yeah, let's do that. I need to grab some more. Let me grab my can. My foot's hurting. For pre-testing though, pre-test and pilot test are different. Sorry, I stood up too quickly. Blood pressure's trying to catch up.
So, you know, he wanted to come here.
No. There we go. Okay. Sometimes the blood pressure will fail. It's an autonomic system, the blood pressure. In pre-test, that's separate from pilot testing.
Did it go well?
Probably, I would say. Yeah, I would like to see the company running here, so you cannot cross from one button. But right on the side, you work on the bottom. Only thing you have to do is control. You want to go deeper? No.
You know the song, The Day I Met Murray? There was a song a long time ago. Titled, The Day I Met Murray. No, not yet.
She'll look it up.
You know, did you go over there? Yeah. I looked at the baby? Yeah. She's in bed, right, so got up like, in the middle of the night. It's opposite, right? Yeah, it's opposite. Did you have fun? You're so sad to leave the family. Yeah. The whole time was everybody, yeah. Yeah. You're doing good.
Yeah, hang in there.
I'm going to leave it at this desk.
Yes. So you
Cold.
Thank you.
Hello. That's all right.
So a lot of the information that you are teaching is really big in terms of what I do day to day.
Mhm.
So I was trying to figure out if, at least with the first half of yesterday,
EFA.
if so, I work in housing,
Oh, yeah?
so I'm managing occupancy. And so I was wondering if the EFAs, I could use some of that information to predict cancellation or forecast cancellation.
You know, it would be good. So, looking at characteristics of tenants in order to determine potential outcomes. What would be good for that is what we're going to learn tomorrow, actually,
Okay.
which is multiple discriminant analysis.
Okay.
And what you do in that case is you say, here are some groups I anticipate. A default group, those who default on their mortgage or their rent or whatever, and then a high quality tenant group.
Okay.
Or an at risk and a no risk or something like that. These are the groups I expect. Here are some characteristics of both kinds of people in those groups.
Okay.
And then what multiple discriminant analysis will do will allow you to predict who's going to be in which group, and it'll show you which variables enable you to most easily predict group membership.
Okay.
So in this case, you could say, well, yeah, there are 5 different characteristics of tenants. these three are the ones that really make a difference. We can predict using these three.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so would we be able to also use that information to predict amount of cancellation, because it's all students, amount of
A forecast, something like that. Maybe. I'd have to think through that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because right now it's really not a guess, it is a guessing game. Like,
Yeah.
we're looking at, okay, we have a finite amount of spaces. This time last year we had this many cancellations. If we keep going,
I mean, if you have a lot of data from years past, you can use that to forecast, certainly.
okay,
You can just do that in Excel with a forecast formula.
okay.
Um,
You say that like I should know how to do that. So I can Google probably.
oh, yeah, Google forecasting in Excel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Hey.
It seems that the doctors have a lot of meetings today.
Yes.
So they might be in the afternoon
Okay.
session or not be able to be here today.
Okay.
And might be tomorrow.
Okay.
So just
Yeah, whenever, I'll keep in mind. I know I brought it up once, but it was very appropriate because somebody asked about it. I'll bring it up again.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Remember, I asked you questions before about certain districts. I did these studies only to do skill development. So the construct, one of them was fun.
Mhm.
And I had 3 dimensions. I didn't remove the constraints
Mhm.
from the regression to the construct.
That's fine.
It's okay.
Oh, yeah. It won't really change your effects. That's fine. Oh, no, you didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. The only reason we did it is to make invariance tests more easier. And also, it won't affect your standardized regression rates.
It won't?
For the most part, no.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And
So it's
then
still valid.
When Kelly asked you about the second model fit being the same, it was actually asking because I showed them. Remember, I asked you too.
That's
Would
right.
you have exact same?
It's unlikely, but it can happen.
It's mind-boggling. It
Yeah.
happens.
Okay.
I tried it several times.
That's fine.
But I will increase the decimal.
Yeah, and see, it should change. Because if your degrees of freedom changed, there will be a change here.
There should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome. All right, let's get started again. It looks like just about everybody's back. Over the break, I placed a new article in the references folder, in our bootcamp Dropbox folder. It's called the Hayes and Ron 1989 5-item social desirability scale. So social desirability, if you Google it, there are several different scales for it. One of them is like 40 items. And that'd be painful to stick in your survey. That's as long as you want your surveys to be anyway. So this one is a 5-item scale that captures social desirability. You can use that. I have a few other things in the references folder I want to point out. Here's the McKenzie 2012 common method bias, also Potsdok. And on formative constructs and formative versus reflective, we have the Jarvis, McKenzie, Potsdok. Notice these guys are fairly popular in methods, but that's regarding formative and reflective measures. We have Hu and Bentler for model fit. They have a bunch of cutoff thresholds for model fit. Let's see. What else do I have here? That's mostly everything. Oh, here's Zhao. We'll talk about him today. Oh, here's the respecification. I told you yesterday, Dave Kenny talking about covariant error terms. This is the website, Dave Kenny's respecification website. If you just double click that, I'll take you to your browser. I have, for some reason, in the past, I've included the Lowry et al. I'm an author on that Fun and Games paper. I'm not sure what that's for, but you might find it useful. I have a paper in the works right now that goes through everything I talk about in these boot camps, all the thresholds, all the methods, the procedures we use, and it has a video linked for every section. It has a video from YouTube linked in the paper. I submitted it to a journal, and they said, this is weird.
why do you have YouTube videos linked in your academic article? Please take this somewhere else. So I took it somewhere else. And at that journal, the senior editor who took it on would happen to be very senior. And he said, if I can learn SEM from these videos, then you'll convince me it's worthy of publishing. And a month or 2 or 3 or 5 later, I emailed him and he said, yeah, I never got into it. So take it somewhere else. This is weird. So people just don't know what to do with a paper that has YouTube videos in it. So it's still in the works. It's not currently under review. But if it ever does get under review, I'll stick it in this folder.
James, is there a threshold for you when you make your decision to have a second order? If it was, remember,
Yeah, sure.
7,
Yeah, the correlation
So
coefficient.
what is the,
So when you decide to make a second order factor, typically it's decided a priori. You decide before you even collect the data that I have this construct with multiple dimensions. But if you discover it, like I did in the process, there are just some real key indicators, red flags. For example, your EFA, those items will load on the same factor, or they'll be terribly cross-loaded. In the CFA, you won't observe discriminant validity. They'll have a really high correlation coefficient.
but up to 80 is all right, according to Quam.
Yeah, up to 80 is fine if your regression weights are also 80. Yeah. Anything above 80 and you're pushing it. Yeah. That's becomes really high, and you run into this argument of tautology where you have something measured with itself, or predicted by itself. If you have one construct that's the same as another construct, how do you know they're different constructs? Really, they're just dimensions of the same thing.
So those are the key indicators. Imputing composites. So this is moving from EFA to, or from CFA to structural models. I'm so excited we're gonna move on to structural models. I'm gonna show you 2 different ways to do this. So let's do this. Let me go back to this one. Okay, I like working with a simple model. Thank you for suggesting that, Osley. Okay, I'm gonna move this around a little bit. So let's say we validated this model, we checked for invariance, we checked for method bias, we checked for all our validities. And by the way, you want to check your validities one last time. If after you've made all your changes and you assess invariance and all the model fit, and after you've added all the different parameters you're going to add and removed all the items you're going to remove, once you're done with the CFA, check your validities one more time. Check your CR, your AVE, your square root of the AVE, get your correlation matrix, run that tool, the validity master tool, once again, and then that's the one you report in your paper, is that final one. And you report the final model fit for the final model here. And you do so, right now I have it split in male and female, but you do so for the full model. It's all data. So, how do we go from here to a causal model? There are different ways to do it. One way is to keep the fully latent model. And what we'll do, we'll say, let's say design, expectation, fit, and usefulness predict skill acquisition. That's our theory. I would delete all arrows that are coming into my soon-to-be endogenous variable. I'd make it pretty by turning it around and moving it up here. And then I just draw arrows. Draw, variance constraint. There we go, and draw another arrow. This is now endogenous, so it needs an error term, which you can then name, plugins, name, unobserved. And there we go, that's our, let me zoom out, that's our causal model.
That's all you have to do. Remove covariances from endogenous variables, draw lines to those endogenous variables, and give the endogenous variable an error. And that should run. Let's try it.
Run. Why didn't I constrain the path? Good question. It didn't run. Fabulous.
So I didn't constrain either of these paths, right? It's because these paths are kind of different
on the other side.
Yeah, one of those.
One of those, thank you.
And that's why I didn't run. It's a good thing I have you guys here keeping me straight. Here we go. So,
For those who didn't jump on that, sort of like me, I had to remove the variance constraint from the latent factor, and so I had to place it back down on one of the regression rates. I couldn't have it up here because I'm now predicting this, and you can't force its variance to be 1 if you're going to try to predict its variance. So move it down here.
now we run it. And it ran, hit the up arrow, and there it is. Yay. We even have it for males and females separately. Cool. Whoa. And there are differences. Look, for female, the effective usefulness on skill acquisition is 0.25 right there. But for males, it's 0.36. Males, we have 0.2 here. Females, we have 0.32. Big differences.
Cool. Anyway, that was easy, right?
That's it. Let me point out some important stuff. When you do this, you should always go back to your analysis properties, and in your output tab, select squared multiple correlations. That's your R square. So if I run this again, all endogenous variables will receive an R square. In this case,
It's 0.26, so we're explaining 26% of the variance of skill acquisition with design and usefulness. Cool. How concerned are we right now with these loadings? Not very. They should remain strong, but we're focused now on the structural model, the causal links between latent factors. That's what we're interested in right now. So these may drop a little because we're now explaining some of the variance here, which is then going to reduce some of the variance explained here. So don't worry too much about these. Just worry about the inner structural model.
the other way, let me save this as something else. Save as hybrid SEM. Let me go back to the problematic model here. The other way is to impute composites. I'm actually going to do it with this big fat one. Ooh, let me delete this and this. We're going to impute composites with this massive model. So you can run a model like the one I just showed you for latent factors. That is the more rigorous approach. You're retaining the measurement model. You're estimating all the errors as you do everything, right? You still have all these error terms here. You have all the indicators. And that's one way to run it. It gets very complex when you have a model like this, and you start adding more regression lines, and you start doing things like mediation and moderation and interactions. That's the worst if you're trying to do it with latent factors. And so one way to simplify all that, so you can just draw boxes and arrows, is to impute composites, which is analyze data imputation. What this will do, you remember yesterday we did a factor analysis, and we at the very end I showed you how to save factor scores, which creates, it collapses this into a single factor or single variable that represents the weighted average of these items based on the loadings. So the weighting is the loading. That's why it's called a regression weight. And then you just form one single variable for that individual factor. If you have a second order factor, it will create it for that second order factor as well. So I hit data imputation, and I'll do this, and then I'll save the data set on the bootcamp Dropbox, and then everybody can use that as we move on to mediation moderation. There are different approaches to this. I use the regression imputation. Excuse me. When would you use these others? I'm not absolutely sure, although I know for non-parametric or non-normally distributed data, sometimes you might use Bayesian imputation. I'm going to use regression. Excuse me. What it's going to do is it's going to create a new file with a new set of variables, and it's going to call it whatever the name of your current file is, and then underscore C. C is for composites. And so you can rename it if you really want to, but I'm just going to hit impute. The model appears to be unidentified. Awesome. Hit OK. Correct. Nothing was created. I'm really glad that happened. I really am. Oftentimes we'll try to impute data and it won't work. But that's because our model doesn't work. We think if we just impute, it'll fix all the problems. Let's run this and see if it will run. And it shouldn't. Yep, it didn't run. So we go back to view the text, which is now hiding. The model is probably unidentified. In order to achieve identifiability, you need 21 additional constraints. Well, that's ridiculous. Why? It doesn't. Let me go to estimation, uncheck estimate means and intercepts. That'll clean things up a little bit so I can see better. So we need to check, does each latent factor have a variance constraint? These do. That one, it's over there. That one's fine. Those do over there. Let me go ahead and move these back. We realize we don't have method bias, so I can move those back to where they originally were and see if that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then, well, it should. If it doesn't, I'm gonna blame it on Amos quirkiness. I'm gonna close the model and reopen it. But really, this model should be fine. Run. Moment of truth. Fail. Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to attribute that to Amos oddity. I'm going to close this. I will, what I want to do, what I'm guessing happened is when I put the CLF in there, there's some sort of remnant somewhere invisible that we're not accounting for. And so, yeah, sure, let me save and close. Save. This should remove the remnant. Go back to here, go to here. There it is. Try running one more time. If that doesn't fix it, recreating it would be the way to go. Or we'll just use the small model and do everything with the small model. Yeah, it didn't run. So let me just recreate. Won't take but a moment. And here they are. And let me do the way we had it before. Maximum likelihood based on eigenvalues and rotation of Promax. That's all I really need. Continue. I will suppress just to make it pretty. 0.3. Okay, just jump down to the pattern matrix, copy this over to here, new data, recent places, data, and plugins. This one, it is. And wait for it to run. Can you imagine if I had to rebuild that from scratch? Woof. It's thinking, it's thinking. And thinking. It'll happen. There we go. Good. Quickly rename these, and then it'll be fine. This is useful. Hope you get some good email done right now. Playful Decision quality. A tip use. Info and computes. There we go. And now we should be able to impute composites. Let's just run it to make sure it works. Save it first. CFA initial, we're going to save over that one because it's problematic at this point anyway. Please work. There we go. It worked. We're good. Let's now impute. Analyze, data imputation. Same thing we did before, but this time it'll work. So this is the exact same models we had before. Why did this one work and the other one not work? Well, because Amos is quirky. Okay, when you impute the data set, it'll say this file was created. You hit OK, and it appears nothing's happened. You might be confused. Did anything happen? Yes, something happened. A data set was created. Just close this. And if you go back to, oops, go back to your data folder, you'll see that bootcamp original _C has now been created. Let me show you what's in it. You now have that. You can download it to your computer. And here it is. If I look at the very bottom, we have these new variables. So these are the latent factors from our CFA. Comp use, interact, basic use, that's what we name them. And now they have a single variable to represent that entire latent factor collapsed into a single variable.
So this is like the regression scores in EFA.
Yeah, it's like the factor scores in EFA. It's identical, actually, almost, except we're placing constraints in the CFA. So it'll be slightly different, but nearly identical. If I double click on one of these, it'll take me, you'll see they are no longer on a Likert scale, but they're darn close because they're averages, right? So they're going to be in some decimals and they're weighted. So even though if I had a 5-point Likert scale, I might observe some values here above 5. I don't see any on this screen, but you might observe values above 5 because it's weighted, and it might weight up or weight down. You might see values below 1 due to weighting. Anyway, so that's what that did. You now have that available to you, and we can start doing some really cool structural models. CFA exercises, you can do these for fun during lunch or something if you'd like. Extra time, we did it, bad validity. Those, we did that. That's everything. Woohoo! Structural models. Yes. I love those questions. So why am I creating those imputed scores instead of just using the big latent model, right? Especially if the latent model's more robust, more rigorous, more accurate. Well, it'll become apparent as we do moderation. When you are using interaction terms, which we'll talk about, is when you multiply variables together in order to account for their multiplicative effect. If you use a latent factor, you have to multiply every item by every other item. And so if you had 3 items in each, you now have, is that 9 or 12 items for your interaction. If you had 6 items in each, like we did, you now have a massive interaction term, and you're adding bajillions of new variables and complexity to your model. So this simplifies it, makes it easier to work with.
So they're weighted averages. What does it weight for?
It looks at the loading. Let me show. So let me put the up arrow here. And, oh, I didn't. Let me run this with output standardized. There we go. Okay. Run that. It's a big model. There we go. And standardized. Yep, there we go. Okay, zoom in. Amos is feeling taxed. Try not to do models bigger than this. Amos doesn't like it. Okay.
So the question is, where's the weighting coming from, and what are the weights and things like that? These are called regression weights. Actually, that's their name. Regression weights. If you look at the tables and the estimates and the output, it's called regression weights. And these are the extent to which this item, so 72 here, 0.72 is the extent to which this item is correlated with all these other items. 0.85, this item correlated with all these other items. And so the question is, so these, if you were to throw these items on a canvas, sort of like that picture we had before with all the items over the model, all the little circles. These weightings drive at what is the center, if anyone's ever done cluster analysis, what is the center of the correlations of these items? Which one is most central, most similar to all the others? You'll see, number, this one, 89, which is for decision quality 8. This is the core item. Everything else is surrounding it. Why? It has the highest loading, 0.89. So it is most similar to everything else, meaning it is most central to the trait we're trying to capture, meaning it is the most important indicator, the most accurate representation of decision quality as we defined it and measured it. So when we then take our averages, we want to give that one more weight than the others because it is the most central item. It has the most accurate representation of what it is we mean by decision quality. And so whatever the answer for decision quality 8 will be multiplied by 0.89, roughly. This is sort of rough algorithm here, but it'll be multiplied by that high weight, and then everything else will be multiplied by its weight. So if I answered 5 for this times 0.89, and then I answered 5 for this, it only says times 0.72, and then all those get put together as our average. That makes sense? Cool. Yeah, so that's the weighting it does. And so what you end up doing is, if you were to just take an average of these instead, well, some of these aren't very indicative of decision quality. Like this 0.72 is far less indicative, 0.72, of decision quality. And so it would have an equal weighting with everything else if we just took an average. And so you would be as accurately capturing decision quality. Now, as you do this, actually, it's not just an average, it takes into account error as well. And the algorithm is a little more complex than that. So when you create your composites, error is accounted for. Yeah.
Hope that clarifies. That was definitely not a stupid question. That was a good question. Oops. Okay.
Oh, lecturing today. We are going to get into Amos, I swear. We are. Structural models, mediation, moderation, and controls is what the main things in structural models. We talked about this, we did that. Let's talk about mediation and moderation. I realize this is review for a lot of you, but for a lot of you, you're hearing this maybe for only the second time, or maybe first time it wasn't totally clear. Mediation proposes a indirect or a transferred effect from IV to the DV. For example, the reason curiosity affects system satisfaction is because curiosity leads to discovery, and discovery is really what affects system satisfaction. Whereas moderation proposes that the effect curiosity has on system satisfaction is different, depending on the level of discovery that you engage in. So for those with high discovery, this is a strengthened relationship. This relationship is stronger for those with high discovery. For those with low discovery, this relationship is weaker. So moderation is all about the change in the relationship between IV and DV. Mediation is all about the actual process of the relationship. How did it really occur? Did it occur directly or did it occur indirectly through some mediating variable? And we're going to do lots of examples like this to clarify. Mediation first, then moderation. In mediation, there are two different schools of thought on how mediation can occur, two different logical arguments. The one is that there's an indirect effect. X affects M, M affects Y, therefore M is a mediator. There is no expected relationship between X and Y. We don't even theorize it. We just know that x affects m and m affects y, therefore m mediates the relationship between x and y. The other, and the one I subscribe to more ardently, is that m is a transfer mechanism for the effect x has on y. So the reason x affects y, because we know x affects y, but the reason it affects y is because of m. In this case, more concrete example, we know that interest affects learning, right? So it's kind of well, we know interest affects learning, but why? The reason why is because interest leads to engagement, and engagement, that's what really affects learning. So the effect, either partially or fully, the effect interest has on learning is explained through some mediating variable of engagement and thinking. That's mediation. And I subscribe to this much more than the indirect effect, although there are lots of people who say this is sufficient. You just need to have x affects m, m affects y.
Stop me if it's confusing.
Mediation is not a simple thing. Mediation is the most complex structural model. And logic to argue, it's just terrible. Now, there are different types of mediation. I just argued for different logics for mediation, but there are different types of mediation. These will make sense as we do the models. There's full, partial, indirect, and competitive mediation, and there are other papers written on this that talk about other types of mediation. But these are some that have quite a bit of literature support. Except competitive, that only has one article that I'm aware of, but it explains something that none of the other articles explain, so I included it. How much sense will this make right now? Work with me. If I see a lot of confused faces, we'll just push forward, then I'll come back to this. So you have full mediation. That's when the effect.
In order to test mediation,
using this line of thought, this transfer mechanism line of thought, which is what I prefer. You need to test the direct effect between x and y without m present. Otherwise, you don't know how m is affecting your model. So you've got to get rid of m, get rid of the mediator, and then test this just directly first. And then you throw m in, and then you can see what happens. So when you do that, you test without the mediator, and then you test with the mediator. If the direct effect from x to y was significant without the mediator, but then you add the mediator and it's no longer significant, well, then you have full mediation if the indirect effect is also significant, which we can test with bootstrap. We'll do that in instance. If, on the other hand, it was the direct effect from x to y was significant without the mediator, and then you add the mediator and it's still significant, but it's a little weaker, that's partial mediation. If it was never significant from x to y, with or without the mediator, but the indirect effect is significant, which you can test again with bootstrapping, well, then you have what's called indirect mediation. And lastly, this is the one that baffled everybody for the longest time until just a couple of years ago. If there is no relationship between x and y without the mediator, but then you add the mediator and for some bizarre reason, the direct effect becomes significant, and the indirect effect is also significant. This is called competitive mediation. Let me explain this one. We're going to do some stuff. I don't know if I have any examples of competitive. It's kind of hard to design. That study I did on extreme life or death situations in combat, we were trying to figure out what was going to make these situations better and make the commanders perform better in these situations. And so we thought, well, maybe it's training, right? It's all about the training they get in their university, their whatever training camps. And so we asked about training, and then we thought, training is going to have effect on performance in those situations, but it's probably mediated by something else, probably mediated by their ability to draw upon that for selfless action. How selfless do they become in these situations because of that training? And so we said selflessness or self-virtue or something like that is a mediator. And there was no effect between training and performance whatsoever, which is bizarre. We thought, that's just bizarre. Surely training affects performance. And so we threw in the mediator of this innate virtue or selflessness. And the weirdest thing happened. The effect from training to performance was significant and negative. There's a negative effect between training and performance. But the indirect effect through virtue and selflessness was positive. So, what's happening? Training has a dual effect on performance in these situations. We are trained in a certain way, we get rigid in our thinking, we act robotically sometimes, and that is the negative effect. It's compounded or neutralized, I guess is the right word, neutralized by this selfless effect, in so much that training develops a selfless nature that affects performance positively. And so these two effects were squished together, and one was positive, one was negative, they were neutralizing each other, so there's no effect between X and Y, in this case, training and performance. When you added the mediator of selflessness and virtue, it allowed these to be separated. The positive effect traveled through the mediator. The remaining negative effect was left to be observed. So that's how competitive mediation is super cool when you can find it. Most people, when they find it, they say, oh boy, this is broken. This shouldn't have happened. So they throw it away.
Can I explain surfacing example? Sorry, close to this, but it's a little bit different.
Surfacing?
Surfacing.
Or suppressing?
Yeah, you have a, in your example, you said there is no
negative.
slide. When you have that one, that's significant, and this becomes negative. But at the present, this is positive significant, and that's also positive significant, but when you add that one, this becomes insignificant or negative.
Yeah, that's good. So that would be, suppression would be full mediation. It's also part of partial. Let me talk about that. So let's say you have X on Y. Let's go back to training and performance. Training affects performance, significant effect, directly, not including any sort of mediator. You add a mediator, training no longer affects performance, but the indirect effect is significant. It has now suppressed that direct effect because it is fully mediated by the mediator.
But how do you explain when it changes to negative?
When it changes to negative and it's significant, that would again be competitive mediation, even though if it started significant here, because there was a dual effect. Yeah. Yes.
Is that competitive what can you call opposing mediation?
Does he have a word for that?
Yeah,
Oh, cool. Maybe. Does it match his description?
it does.
Cool.
I didn't know.
Opposing. No, so this is, I have an article, Zhao et al. 2010-ish. Here it is, let's see. Down at the bottom, yeah. Reconsidering Barron and Kenny. So they call that competitive. But I'd never heard it called opposing by Barron and Kenny. Cool. Or no, you said just Kenny. Okay. That's why.
Like one little sentence with that, but it's multiple mediator where they cancel each other.
Oh, cool. I didn't know he had written on that on his website.
Very cool. All right, so those are some of the different types of mediation you'll observe. And we can test for them, which is what we'll do right now. Let's do that right now. Let's test. This is going to be, let's not do something that complicated. Let's just throw some variables together. Okay, go into Amos. This is where I want you to follow along to use the data. Save. And create a new canvas and pull in the bootcamp_C data, the one that we just saved with composites. This one. Sorry, I haven't had you clicking a lot today. There's a lot of conceptual stuff we need to discuss in order for this to make sense. Just jumping straight into the clicking might not have been helpful at that point. We were just been clicking without knowledge. All right, so pull in the bootcamp data, C_C, and hit OK. And if you look at the white stacky thing,
and go to the very bottom of that list of variables, the very bottom, you'll see these ones here: compuse, infoac, decision quality. Let's throw a few in there. Let's use decision quality as our dependent variable. Let's use enjoyment. Let's see. Let's see. Let's use playful as our independent variable, and let's use enjoyment as our mediator. Let me zoom in here. So the theory here is playfulness affects decision quality. An increase in playfulness will help you make better decisions. Yeah. Oh, refresh your browser. Yeah, if you guys can't find the data, it should be, if you refresh the browser, it should be there.
There it is.
Cool. The theory here is that playfulness affects decision quality. As you increase in playfulness with your use of Excel, the quality of decisions you make increases. But the reason for that is because you start enjoying your use of Excel. That's why your decision quality increases, because you're enjoying it more. And when you enjoy more, you make better decisions. Whereas if you don't enjoy, you don't make good decisions. That's a very loose theory, which is making up ad hoc right here.
I'm sorry, could you reverse a little bit? I just got the data.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you've got the data. Click on this little white stacky thing. Oh, no. Go to File, Data Files. Yep. In Amos. I'll help you out. Oh,
I'm in SCSS. I mean,
oh, yeah, good.
where's
Okay.
that?
Amos is right here.
Ah,
Yeah, there we go. There's, there you go.
okay, got it.
Data files.
Okay.
There you go, data files. Right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
And then file name. And go find that data. You just go to recent function. And downloads probably right there. And then go to the white stick. And then go to the very bottom. And if you're going to make a model like mine, so decision quality out here, you can drag this.
Got it.
And then you close that white stack window when you're done.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else need help getting this set up? Yeah. All right, so in Amos, Amos is here. And then go to New, File New. Yeah. There we go. And you go to this little button to get the data, file name, and then go to recent places. And then it's probably going to be, actually, where might it be? Where's the data you just say? Oh, there it is. And okay. And then white stacky thingy. Yeah. I go to the very bottom and drag out those three. Yep, that's the one. Yeah. And okay. And then go to the white stacky thingy. The one below. Yep. And then go to the very bottom and drag out those three variables. Yeah. And then you close
Dropbox, but now you
All right. So if you want to move them around afterwards, again, use the red fire truck thingy to move them around. We are going to draw a line, the single-headed arrow, from playful to decision quality. If we're going to test it in order, we should probably get rid of enjoyment, right? Because we're going to test with and without the mediator. So I'm actually just going to get rid of enjoyment with this little X thing. Enjoy. I have a very simple model right now. And then there's this little thing under the candelabra. It's an error term adder. Click on that and then click on decision quality. That will create an error term for decision quality. Don't click above it, click right on it so it's red while you're clicking. It's this little thing under the candelabra. And again, you have to click and click. You can't click and drag. And if anyone needs help with that, ask your neighbor. More often than not, they have the solution. Okay. And then if you want, you can either double click it and name it, or go up to plugins and name unobserved variables. That'll name your error term for you just automatically as E1. Which, incidentally, I should mention, never name your variables E1, E2, E3. That's bad, because Amos assumes that's the name of the error. So, there we go, E1. And what we want to do is find out if this is significant. But first, let's save this as, let's see, I'll save as mediation without mediator. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take this table here and just copy it. Let's see, Control D. There we go. And delete. And we'll just fill that in. Okay. So here we are. We're about to test this first column, X to Y without mediator. First, I want to go to analysis properties, the colored abacus thingy. And in output, do squared multiple correlations and standardized estimates. That's in the output tab of analysis properties. And then hit run and hit the up arrow. Make sure it's on standardized down here. Up arrow's up there, standardized right here. And we observe we have a 0.28 regression value. That's the relationship between these two. And we have an R-square of 8%. Not very good, but it's only one variable.
Which button does run?
Which one is the non-colored abacus? The white, black and white one. Anyone needs help? Yeah, okay. You get to that point. It's cool if we take it easy here. If we're on the same page.
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. So that is a
So you must go.
yeah, it's like it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the model. It's just Amos on it. So you can do the same. And it happens sometimes if you don't save first. There we go. And now try it again. Yeah. Hey, no problem. Okay. Anyone else? Oh, there we go. I mean, standardized. There you go. If you have weird numbers on there, make sure you hit standardized, not unstandardized. Good. All right. So the question is that significant? The answer is we don't know, but it probably is. Let's go check. If you go to your output, view text next to the save button, go to estimates. That triple star, that means it's significant at the 0.001 level. If you want to know how many zeros there are, again, you can change the decimals, put it out to whatever, however many. This is significant at the 0.00016 zeros level. So this is highly significant. So let me take that back up to 3. The standardized effect is 0.28. It is significant. So I'm just going to put that in here, 0.28 star, because it's super duper significant. I don't know if it's full, partial, or indirect or competitive yet. Well, no, I know it's not indirect or competitive at this point, because it is significant to start off with, unless it
switches, and then it could be competitive. Anyway, we'll see. Okay, let's go throw the mediator in there. So hit the down arrow to unfreeze everything. Go back to that white stacky thing and stick enjoyment in. Draw arrows. Give enjoyment an error term because it's now endogenous. And name that error term. You can do it with a plugin or double click it. Name unobserved variables. Okay. I'm going to save this as with mediator. So it looks something like this. I'm going to go ahead and run it so you guys, and then I'll walk around. Zoom in a bit so you guys can see that in the back. Okay. You don't need assistance. It won't let you save? Have you tried kicking it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, that could definitely be operator error. Oh, I need to say that.
Yeah. Say that. Oh, looks great.
Well, thank you. And what's the title?
Oh, whatever it is. Yeah, CMB with mediator or something like that. Okay, go. Numbers? Yeah, you can standardize. So you don't have standardized, click on standardized.
Oh.
There we go. Drop notes.
I had that. Where is that?
Yeah, so it's standardized. Let me show everybody.
I've done mine.
Okay, if your numbers are different from mine, it's either because you've been tampering with the data or you're on unstandardized down here. Click on standardized. Unstandardized, standardized, unstandardized, standardized. Okay. And then you should have similar numbers here.
I would like to see the R square.
I'm going to go back to that colored abacus, the analysis properties. And, oh, squared multiple correlations is selected. Why am I not seeing the R square? Oh, I'm on unstandardized. Ha, that's why. There we go. Standardized. Okay. Notice a few things. The R square on the dependent variable has more than doubled. This is a good sign. This is good. That means, to some extent, your mediator is useful. Whether it's a mediator or not, we don't know. Notice very strong effects from playful to enjoy and from enjoy to decision quality. Very strong effects, most likely significant. And notice the tremendous drop from X to Y, playful to decision quality. This is indicative of full mediation. Let's just make sure it's not significant. We go here to the output, go look at estimates. Sure enough, from playful to decision quality, that X to Y relationship, the p-value is way above 0.05. And so we are here, X to Y is 0.05 was the actual effect. And oops, this is not significant. We have some evidence. We don't have all the evidence yet. We have some evidence that this is highly likely to be full mediation, based on the previous slide. Significant before, not significant afterwards. That's full is the only one that matches that criteria. But in order to substantiate this, we need to know if the indirect effect is significant. And the only way to do that is to run a bootstrap. I love that word. Bootstrap. Okay. So let me save this. What we're going to do is go to the analysis properties. And there's a bootstrap tab. Click on that. It's right next to the output tab. And you're going to perform the bootstrap. Now, back when Amos was made, I think back in the 1920s, 200 was a lot of resamples because computers were very weak in the 1920s. Now our computers are fairly strong. So we can add a 0 here and do 2000. When you bootstrap, you artificially inflate certain estimates. So to correct for that, we do bias corrected intervals. And you can do this at 90 or 95. That's up to you. The p-value is the same either way. So don't close that yet. Go back to your output tab. And click on indirect, direct, and total effects, top right. I might need to take a break here pretty soon. My heart's not working. So click on that, and then save, and then lay down and take a break. We'll start back up in about 5 minutes, I think. I hope. I'm gonna lay down. Carry on. I'm fine. No, but what I do need. Oh no, it's all right. I need sugar. I have sugar. Have you ever had high cheese before? They're really good in Asia.
Really? What is it? It's candy?
It's really good. This one's sour apple. I also have grape.
Yeah, I would like to try it. How'd you find that?
Go to Japan. They're like Starburst, Japanese Starburst.
But where do you get them here?
I don't know.
Oh, really chewy.
They're really chewy, yeah. Ooh, I'm just getting really dizzy there. My brain is getting sluggish.
Okay. Good. I'm scared.
Yeah.
The air is okay.
It's fine.
Is it hot in here?
But
I know, I don't know why. This is normally,
yesterday I was burning. I was sweating so bad.
this was normally freezing.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's right. Maybe it's because there's so many people in here and every machine's running.
Could be.
The fans and the machines are pushing out hot air. There's my dinner.
I don't know how to get, I accidentally made three.
I'm okay. 100% normal.
Maybe now.
Oh my God, you know what? I suck. I got chocolate and coconut.
That's fine.
I swear, 2 cups of coffee.
We're working on the house again.
I
That's
took the wrong route to the Kimberly,
It's all right.
and then I ended up going on vino.
That's all right. I knew that was a lie.
And
I'm good.
it was good sports. No, just take it easy.
Maybe for that.
You know, we're very close to the lunch break. It's 9:44 for lunch.
Well, okay. Let me finish this thought. We're almost done. Yeah. I'm doing pretty good.
And then,
Okay.
but you had one. Thanks for the candy.
No, it's good, huh?
It's good, yeah.
The grape is really good too.
So Starburst would be another good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll get some Starburst.
I have lots of these. It's great.
Yeah. I have marzipan chocolate.
This is.
Do you like it?
It's good stuff.
It's my
It's really good.
favorite. Tomorrow. Give me your hand.
Slowly.
Okay. Okay.
It's slowly. Is
I
my
don't
blood
think I should
pressure?
get up.
That's right. I'll just sit right there. My blood pressure doesn't respond the way it's supposed to because of the nerves. And so my blood pressure will actually drop when I stand up, especially the opposite. It's supposed to
It
go up.
happens to me too. And I
But
don't
then
have
it
no
won't,
issues.
it won't fix that. It's really good.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, sorry about that. For those who weren't here yesterday, I have a neurological disorder. Sometimes my autonomic nervous system fails, and so my heart stops beating. which is fun. All right, here we are. You know what helps it though is chocolate. Okay, it does, I swear. Yeah, okay, except white chocolate. Anyway, you have Oreos? Excellent, I will rely on you. I just had some high chews, they help. I don't know if anyone's had high chews, but so good. Okay, they're from Japan. Okay, we decided that we might have full mediation. Sorry, my brain turned off a bit. You can probably see my language getting all slurred and sluggish. We might have full mediation, but the only way to determine with confidence that we have full mediation is to run a bootstrap test. So let's go. Oh, we did set that up. That's right. Sorry, it's all a blur the last few minutes. We have indirect, direct, and total effects. We have bootstrap set up, and we're going to run this model. And you look at it, it looks identical. It's because it is. Go to your output. And there will be new things to look at here. Click on estimates. Click on matrices. We've never seen that before. And then click on standardized indirect effects, the very bottom matrix. This tells us what the standardized indirect effect is. It's 0.227. Now, if we were to go and look at the direct effects, if we were to multiply 0.56 by 0.41, I bet you we'd find something like 0.227. That's all it is, really. Let me see, calculator, 0.56 times 0.41, enter, 0.2296. So pretty darn close to 0.227. Just takes into account error, which we didn't. So 0.227 is the standardized indirect effect. So let me put that in here in our little table. 0.227. Is it significant? Well, we can go, excuse me, we can go down here to the bootstrap confidence, bias corrected percentile, two-tailed significance, very bottom, at the very bottom of that bootstrapped area. And here's the p-value for that indirect effect. It's 0.001. So essentially a star, star, star. Depending on where it is really. Let me push that out a couple more decimals. It's 0.0055 or 0.00055. So that is less than 0.001. Again, you change decimals up here. And so we are significant at the 99.9% confidence level. So we have full mediation. We can say that
the whole reason playfulness affects decision quality can be explained by the enjoyment that results from being playful and the resultant quality increase in your decisions from enjoying your interactions. That is the full reason for the effect playfulness has on decision quality. It's all because of enjoyment. So that is a fully mediated model. Now, if this had retained some significance but had dropped in amplitude, we say it was partially mediated. And so part of the reason playfulness affects decision quality is because of its effect on enjoyment and enjoyment's effect on decision quality, with a partial mediation. Now, if this had flipped to be negative and significant, that's competitive or opposing mediation, or if it had never been significant in the first place and became significant, that would be opposing. Here's a question: what if this value right here was significant, as it is, but this value right here was not significant? No mediation. Can't, because this doesn't have a significant effect on this, therefore we can't really be mediated through it, because it has no effect on the dependent variable. So this has to be significant, this has to be significant, and the indirect effect, which is just the multiplied effect here and here, has to be significant. Cool. And that's how easy mediation is. It's a little complex to theorize and write about. That's the hardest type of logic to write, I think, is mediation logic. explaining the reason for the effect of IV on DV. You can think of it that way, the logic's not too bad.
James, can you repeat
Yeah.
the concluding sentence about the full mediation?
Yeah, sure. I'll repeat a little bit more.
The concluding sentence, the decision quality happens because of.
Yeah, so the full effect playfulness has on decision quality is explained through enjoyment. The reason playfulness affects decision quality is because of enjoyment.
Okay.
It's the full reason. Now, there might actually be some other mediators. We don't have 100% R squared, so there might actually be other mediators that explain other parts of the effect playfulness has on decision quality. But in this case, enjoyment explains the full effect. Whereas if this were still significant but small, it would be enjoyment explains part of the effect. It's a partial mediator. That was simpler than it had to be. That was good.
So that means when you remove enjoyment, there's no relationship between these two.
Oh, this is a great point. The answer is no, but I think you're getting at the right answer. What if we don't include enjoyment in our model? Playfulness has a strong effect on decision quality. Does it? Well, statistically, yeah, it does. But does it? No. Enjoyment does. The only reason playfulness affects decision quality is because of enjoyment. If we don't include enjoyment in our model, we're essentially not controlling for the effect of enjoyment, and therefore we cannot make valid conclusions based on that significant effect. Happens all the time. I was doing a study on firm performance. We were looking at pricing models, how you price your products or services, and how that affects firm performance. And I guess it's more of a control argument, but it's a good point. The reviewer came back. We found great effects, by the way. It was very significant. Pricing strategy effects for firm performance. And the reviewer came back and said, no, it doesn't. You know what affects firm performance? Prior firm performance. Last year's firm performance. You know what else affects it? Firm size. We didn't control for those things. And so, sure enough, we had the data. We were able to get it because we knew which firms we had sampled. And the effect was gone. So pricing strategy did not affect firm performance and when controlling for those other more important, more influential variables. I think we'll need a break for lunch right now. Sorry, my health is failing. But the lunch will do me some good, and we'll be back at 2. Or is it 1:50? I can't remember. 2. Okay. Great. And we'll talk about moderation after lunch.
No, we don't have a class. We can leave it.
Yay! I'll be all right. I need to get food in me. All right, that's half the problem.
Okay, so I'll ask you one more question. So
Maybe you're failing your autonomic system.
I need to lie down.
Yeah.
So instead of saying there's no relationship between the two after you remove enjoyment.
Because there is one.
No, instead
Yeah.
of saying that, if
Yeah.
you, let's say you don't have enjoyment in your study, let's say the expected relationship you were looking for does not exist.
Right.
So in your article, you would not say there's no relationship, but you would have to say maybe
We are not accounting.
with the existing information, the relationship cannot be concluded.
Yes, that's in your limitations area.
Okay.
So there are some variables like training. And in that example, you have training and performance in extreme situations. We know training has an effect on performance. It's gotta. But we couldn't figure it out, except with that mediator. If we had not had that mediator, we would have to have said in our limitations and future research, we know it's got to have an effect. We just don't know what the effect is explained by.
Yeah. Okay.
I love those.
Wait, I couldn't get the significance of under effect, like under
Oh,
service.
let's look at it. Yeah.
Did you
No,
The estimate didn't show.
I was.
Maybe we should run one more model at lunch.
Okay, with bootstrapping.
With bootstrapping, yeah, the two-tailed significance. Yeah, we'll do that again.
First time I'm doing bootstrapping. And,
Okay.
and I like your examples when you're like talking about full competitive.
Oh, good, that
function.
worked. I was worried that would be
You
too
say
abstract at the
when you-
point.
No, those examples help me. I'm very
Okay.
visual. I try to visualize, and your examples kind of make it
Oh, good.
concrete for me. So we do that. It really helps. And also bootstrapping.
I didn't explain what it did.
What does it
Okay,
do?
I'll explain
to the
when we
data?
get back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So boosted is better than sober test.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up the Sobel test as well, and when it's appropriate and when it's less appropriate. And I have it in the slides as well. I have a couple slides on that. And we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's okay. I just need to get some food in me. I'm hurting.
Okay, let's go then.
So yeah, I'm gonna take it slowly.
Do you want to lie down?
I left my wheelchair at the library. It's okay.
At this library here?
No, not library. My brain stopped working. Hotel.
Should I check if they have
It's
one?
okay. I can take the elevator. I can get there.
Why don't you lie down a little bit?
Because I need to get food in me. That's the issue.
Do you want me to bring food
No.
here first?
Let's go. I'll make it. If I don't make it, I'll sit along the way. It'll be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna die. Haven't died yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Well. Oh wait. I want to bring my laptop.
Yeah, I can get it for you. No,
And
you don't.
helping people. And I need to stop the session too on YouTube. Okay. Let's see. Thank you for joining us.